Welcome on the 132nd episode of The Leaders Who Care. As you know, we are on a mission to spread the care culture and bring some of the most caring leaders from every corner of the world to share their best practices, to tell us, to inspire us more, and give us a great example that, yes, success matters, but how you get there is equally important. Today, we have a special guest, and I have the privilege and honor to welcome someone who has made a profound difference in a number of people's lives and leaders, and a founder and a head coach of Visible Leader, and at the forefront of organizational transformation, merging innovations and with cultural acumen to forge dynamic leadership landscapes. I have the privilege to welcome Martin Wolf, founder of the Visible Leader. Martin, welcome on the Leaders Who Care.
Hello, thanks so much for inviting and congratulations to the great mission you have. I think what could be more important than people who care? It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Martin. I always say it shouldn't be a thing called leaders who care. We want to make ourselves obsolete because every leader should care. But as we all know, that's still not the case. And would love to take your view on the topic of leaders who care and how really they can serve and make a difference, and the reality today that we have. So, but first of all, tell us more about Visible Leader mission and purpose, because not every leader wants to be visible. So I'd love to hear more about Visible Leader and its purpose of it.
You get a good feeling for my sense of being provocative, because especially in mid-Europe, being visible is something that is not only, connotated to good things. And I heard a lot of questions around, is a visible leader someone who's a self-marketer or show-off? And it's the very opposite. I founded Visible Leader because I believe in these times where we have global major geopolitical shifts, where we have sustainable challenges around, where we have mid-managers who struggle with a lack of directions, top managers who say there is so much uncertainty, I don't know what to do. I believe we need to amplify now these people who really care about people and who want to make an impact. And visible leaders are not only managers, founders, and executives, but as well experts who say there is a certain topic, no matter if this is sustainability or data science or project management, that they really care about it. And they want to make an impact for the industry, for the customers, for their colleagues, for their society. And Visible Leader is basically directing on two dimensions. How much impact do you make with what you do? And here's the concept of positive egoism. There's a psychological concept that says you have a right to be meaningful. And we all want to be meaningful in what we do. So we want to make an impact. And I think that's something that is not a working reality for a lot of people in Europe and on a global scale. And I think that's something where we can contribute as leaders by making job roles more clear, easier to understand, and probably more impactful by just increasing the transparency. And on the second hand, there is this visibility component. If you do good, you have to talk about it. I don't think it should be a question of politeness to hold back. We need all these inspiring role models, and they are out there. There are people who are interested in humans. There are people who are interested in the environment. There are people who are out there that are interested that democracy works. And I think it's important in these times where we have a lot of negative messages that we just turn on the good things. And that's basically the mission. There are a lot of people out there who do that already, and that makes it quite good. So in my own podcast, I'm inviting visible leaders. And Marian, I'm looking forward to welcome you there to talk about that, because you do a podcast, you have a great website, you do a lot of initiatives, and that's exactly what I aim to, that the younger people and the people who sit at home and say, I already do a lot and I know a lot and I'm very, taking the ambition to make an impact, but I don't care and don't dare to get on a stage and speak about it. And it doesn't have to be the stage. It can be going in the job and talking with one colleague, and you already make an impact. Sorry, you see, my passion goes high on that topic, but basically the idea is making the good things louder, amplifying topics that matter.
I love that, Martina. And for me, I went through the same journey when before launching the Leaders Who Care, and I was not particularly interested to be as public as I'm becoming, I guess. But I felt that if I can contribute to even one person's life in a positive way through the work we do, or amplify that, it's worth the inconvenience, because it's very comfortable to be at the back end and just do what you do and make an impact in a where you are around your environment, around your business or the colleagues or the suppliers or even the coffee shop. Just just treat people, and love people with all of your heart, like you do for yourself. I mean, that's a principle, I guess, that if we follow, um, that we have from scripture, and if I use Jesus as his sacrifice, it's just something very powerful. It's not always easy to do because as humans, we prioritize other relationships, and it's how do you love everybody the same way? But I understand a lot of leaders are questioning that, and I thank you for giving us these examples that you can be visible in many different ways, not just going to a public stage speaking, could be through a podcast, could be through your own people, or going to other on the shop floor and talking to really day-to-day employees. That goes a long way, and this is what we deeply care about, the human-centric element. On Monday, I actually yesterday put a quote. um, it's not about the job, right, or the role. It's about the goal. So leaders get into this for to make a difference, and not to be a leader, and that's what you want to show. To what difference you make, and how can you amplify the difference you want to make.
Yeah, I think there is this interesting concept of leadership moments that matters, and everyone who's listening now, think about, I asked that question like the last 5 years to all my friends, they already know that. And the question is, do you remember one moment in your past professional life where a leader said something or did something, and that was so clear an impact that you said, okay, I'm either going to stay at this company, I'm going to go all in, or I'm going to leave that company because I feel so disrespected. And when I asked that question to all my friends and a lot of business partners, the interesting thing was 90% of the answers is yes, and it was a negative experience. And I think that's something we leaders are sometimes not aware. And when I hear that cases, it's something like, my manager didn't think about that this is weekend and I had the birthday of my child. Yeah. And I know as working with these leaders that they are just working 24/7 and have a like heavy machinery of traction in them, and they don't mean it personal, but the message that arrives has a deep impact. And in the other way around, if you come to work and you are happy with yourself, or you are honest and you talk about, today I have a bad day, because that's something I do with my teams. When we come together, we have 52 weeks in a year. And statistically, it's very likely that 10 to 15 weeks are going to be super tough for each and every member of our team. So how are we going to deal with these bad weeks? Are we going to lie to each other and tell each other, no, everything is fine? Or are we going to allow each other to hide out? That's mostly not possible. But I think these are essential conversations you need to have in a team and as a leader. These tiny moments have gigantic impact on people. And if we don't care, I come back to your mission, then this happens. And this one tiny moment can be positive, inspiring, because you go to work and you are happy and you enjoy what you do and you enjoy your friends. Or you go to work and you are unhappy. It all starts with ourselves. But I think the people I'm addressing have a very high interest in, scaling their impact. So for these people, it's important to say, how can I reach as many people as possible? I hardly
Mm.
ever hear, how can I get famous or how can I get rich? It's much more about, there are so many people, there are so many problems. I want to spread it as far as I can. And my personal experience in the last 20 years was, there is a whole network of people who support you, who invites you to a podcast, who's, connecting you. You just have to ask, and you have to be sincere and respectful with yourself and your environment. And um, at the bottom of the heart, I had last week an interview with a founder who's now exited with a couple of 100 million valuation. And he said, it is hard work. And I would do it again because it was a great team and it was a great time. And I want to run through that hard work with these hard people. And I think that makes the difference. If you have people who can shine, the other people will find hope and trust in an organization. And there you have this cultural aspect of visible leadership as well. You see, it's a whole cosmos. At the end, it's quite simple. We have these hidden experts in a lot of organizations. These are people who have a trauma and say, I shared and people didn't listen to me. And when that happens often enough, you will stop to share. And that's a horrible song because they are highly contributing to the organization, but they don't share it anymore. And what you need to do there is helping them to find new ways of visibility. And that's not only a leadership task, but mostly. And there's as well an organizational component to say, how can we amplify our leaders? How can we amplify our experts? And these are two different target groups within an organization that in the 90s, we all know that was called competence marketing. And we had gigantic posters on airports with, this is your great consultant. I think nowadays it's different. Nowadays it's about people going home and say, I'm proud that I work at company XYZ. And this needs to be earned.
We deeply care about our mission at the company that I lead at Dynamics is how can we help more people to thrive at work, not survive.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that it starts from the leaders. So that's why I really appreciate a lot of the work you do, because that combination of, as we say, the fish smells from the head. If you start from that, then you can, of course, it's still a lot of complexity, a lot of layers that you need to shift something that was not working to make it better. And that's often cultural shift and transformation. So the visibility and that you're talking about is born by how can we help more people and so reach more people to solve a problem versus how can I become more famous or so this is a good message to all the leaders that are modest and have humility, because I do really appreciate one of the key fundamentals that I look into a leader is their humility. I just, for me, that's very important, because when you're humble, you can hear those comments that you're talking about. You can you can listen more, you can take action, and you're kind of protected from all the dangers that are perhaps coming. And it's not easy to be a leader. So I always think, how can we take care of those leaders who need help? Not just they're there and they really do well and they care about others, but they really need help, and they're ready to change, but they're not there yet. So, and this is where the balance comes in of being a visible leader. Um, does it lead to arrogance? Have you seen that? How do you manage that? Because you help them and they get into a stage position where they command influence. Where's the balance in actually
I,
maintaining?
I gotta say, in the last years, I'm highly focused on people who want to make an impact first. So before I go into coaching sessions with people, they have to fill quite an extended questionnaire that takes about 2 hours of their time and demands a lot of self-reflection. And that is basically our go-to way to really find out, do we have a value fit? And I think that's important for both sides, because it's completely okay to say, I want to increase my visibility, sell a lot of my books and earn a lot of money, and that's fine. I personally believe there is usually, this drive for making an impact to the good to the world. So that's a quite easy theme to sell to somebody. It's not always on the surface. But what I have more a look on is what is the energy level of the people at the moment. So it doesn't help you if you have the master plan, but your life is currently so debalanced that you don't have the focus and the energy to put that ambition into life. And the second aspect is to really see, is there high interest to learn and to experiment? Because if you don't, like if somebody is searching someone who writes the LinkedIn post for him or herself, I'm not the right person. I put people in their power, in their responsibility, that they can write a LinkedIn post and set that off in 5 minutes, and it makes an impact because they know what they are talking about. And I think that's a specific service niche that I'm offering here. There are a lot of great agencies and personal branding experts, but for me, it's about this millimeters work that you do. There's always an aspect of our personality that we try to protect. And I think it's a constant personal development to find out, what am I able to share today? And every year gives us new experiences. And I always say it extends the keyboard that you can play your song on. And people tend to react on that endorphin rush that you get when 1,000 people like your comment or your posting or your article. And I'm not excluding myself of that. I think the importance is to be good rooted, to really understand that this is not your value. And I think that's something where most of the people I work with have a good value system already in place, where they say, hey, this is a certain business layer, and then there's the private person, and I have other values as well. But yeah, that happens. And if that happens, it's mostly not very damaging. Like you get a bit, high feelings on the weekend, that's fine. The problem is if it goes down. And that happens because every algorithm wants to motivate you with pain to do more. So if you have great numbers, you can be sure you will have a downtick sooner or later. And this downtick will say, I have to work harder for that. And that's how social media is working. So I motivate you through a negative experience, and I give you, the bonification of a lot of reach with and interactions on your content, is a disciplining process. And when you take that too serious and when you take that too close to your heart, you go through a really roller coaster of, oh my God, in the first 10 minutes, nobody answered. And everyone who thinks I stand above that, not at all. That's the fake reality you build yourself. I think it's just important to reflect and distance yourself from time to time and remember that it's not about the reaction of a machine. It's about this one person that hears it and says, wow, I sat in a similar situation. Good to hear that somebody shares that right now. And I think we all can do that. In terms of the positioning, I think you have different ways of getting visibility. So a lot of experts I know like to be teacher and, transfer knowledge. And that's one way of having visibility. But not everybody of them can go to the university, because then we would have more university professors than students. So I think what you need to do there is to explore different ways of hosting a meetup, I'm a big fan of bringing people together for a drink or for some food and talk about it. So I live here in Vienna, and Freud had this thing called Wednesdays Club. And he brought together therapists, like 5 or 6, to talk about therapy. And like, what are they scared of and what are they afraid of? And my advice to everyone who has a topic that matters, and no matter, this can be yoga, this can be big data, this can be, I don't know, psychology, bring together 5 people that are interested to talk about it and prepare 3 bullet points. And this is the start of your initiative, and then see where it guides you. And if you feel like talking is not your thing, write it, record it, send it. The most important thing is, if you don't share it with another person, this idea will never grow. And this is very essential, because before I launched this brand, I was sitting 2 years on it, and I read it, the homepage, like for 15 times, because I worked with brands like Nike on a global level, Hewlett Packard. If you ever been in a shop, you saw work of mine. And with my own brand, I could not push it over the goal line because I was shitting my pants. That's how life is, and we are all human. And that happens to great leaders, and that happens to everyone in the beginning. It's just a question of how do you deal with that? And asking for help is a good idea. So learn from others. And I want to invite to people talk about that because it feels awkward in the beginning when you try to be super smart in something you create or try to be super friendly or super liked. We are all doing that. The question is just how do we handle that? Does that make sense, Marian?
No, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. I'm just thinking already there's so many great leaders that perhaps don't have their personal brand as visible as others. Maybe some CEOs obviously have a good marketing support and agency that handle this for them. But what about for those, especially you come from that part of the world where the term Mittelstand, mid-sized businesses, the backbone of the economy, especially in Germany, and probably see a lot in Austria and in Switzerland. So, and sometimes those leaders have been there like for 30, 40 years. And may they not be as perhaps active online, or they're visible because of what they've achieved in their field, but perhaps not as visible to other mid-sized businesses or other industries. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity to share best practice, because I
Absolutely.
know the problem there. In Germany, for example, one third of the mid-sized businesses are going to go out of business due to poor succession. And sharing the best practices of how to succeed effectively from a great leader who's been like a light tower for 30, 40 years to successfully pass this on, it's something that is of high value. And it's best to hear it from people who have done it rather than just advisory and consultancy. That also helps. But um, what is your advice to ones that are not doing this? Maybe they're late 60s, early 70s, and just perhaps may not want to be bothered with all this. How how can you make it easier for them? What steps could they take to say, you know what, I may want to leave something behind me, and not just for my own company, but also for the overall industry, or
Hmm.
for the whole country that they're facing this challenge.
I think so. First of all, the question is always what do people have to say? And I hardly ever met people who, when they opened up, did not have something to say because it's a human psychology basic need that we want to be seen for something that we value. And I think the core question is, what is the story? What is that one thing you want to share with the world? And you will be surprised how precious the first answer in the first 5 minutes is. It's not about the overthinking and making a big plan. It's what comes out from your heart because you do that naturally already the last 70 years of your life somehow. So this amplifying topics that matter is usually something you already do. You have been nice to people. You cared about your clients. You mastered excellence. When I think of Mittelstands, we have so many great professionals in there. And
Yes.
I think, like from a company owner perspective, heritage is for sure a big angle. I worked with Zeiss in Germany, and it was so impressive. Zeiss makes lenses and a lot of more stuff that I'm not qualified to explain it better. And when you arrive there, um, there's a little museum, and it's for free for the guests. And I walked through there, and there was a picture taken by a Zeiss lens of Napoleon. And then you walk in the next room, and there is a picture of the moon, the first ever moon landing picture, and it was made with a Zeiss lens. And the fun fact is, you don't find that on the website. Like I guess by now you do. You don't find that on social media. You found that only when you drove to Oberkochen, like a mid-sized town, city in Germany, with a 2 hours drive from the airport. And I think that's the interesting thing. It's not about does it get fancy and ready for TikTok. It's about is there a cool story, and it goes the same for a company as it goes with a person. If you introduce someone on a conference and you have a good story to this person, it's quite easy for you to give that introduction, and it's quite easy for that person to buy that introduction because, wow, this is the guy who took a photo of Napoleon. What a good story. And that doesn't make business, but that triggers our curiosity. And I'm deeply, deeply and rooted curious. So when I meet people, I don't care what level they work. I'm really curious on what do they have to tell and what makes their eyes shine. And once you found that topic, it's quite simple to get into going and say, are you not motivated that we do something with that story? Yeah. And then we experiment. So if I think of like the founder level, I would say very likely it's about how can we assure our values, will still be treated in the same way? How do we, empower dialogues about values that are important to us? And I think that's very important. In these days, we have this high promises of everything is easy and everything is so smooth and everything, you can become a millionaire in a minute and everything digital solves everything for you. And that's a really dangerous promise that is out there because it mostly doesn't work. Because 99% of the people that I met who are successful say it's very hard work. And I tend to believe that it's not the stupidity of someone not buying that master coaching program, whatever. But it's a lack of information that this hard effort is needed and this energy available and the skills available and the right time available. So it's a lot of parameters. And I think we have to be careful that people don't get, pushed in a way to forget about values of hard work, of discipline, of what it takes to bring a company over decades. And I don't know if you think of that founder now and they are in their 70s, just observe how TV changed, how media changed. Like there would be movies in my story where I would be super curious to hear more. Thinking of the company and its employees, I think an interesting question would be, how did you achieve that people want to work for your company 50 years ago? And how is it nowadays? And I'm making that with a twinkle in an eye. Was the fruit co-op, like the fruit basket, already the big thing in the 50s? I don't think so. But like-minded people always find together. So you will find personas at the employees who are a bit like the founders or who have similar values. And I think that's the interesting dynamic where you start to spin communication around. And you see it's 80% finding that story and identifying how does that make you feel when we talk about that story, and then 20% on the execution. For this, there are agencies there, and not everybody has to be on social media. I could imagine like something I do now with startups because they really like it, and it's a routine that I borrowed from Mittelstand is go with your clients together on a lunch, bring all of them together once a quarter, half a year. And I'm not talking about the big golf course. I'm talking about having conversations about what is the future of our industry? Where do we, go from an innovation perspective? And this kind of cross-corporate exchange is more valid than ever. And I think in the past, people did that. We outsourced that to automated emails nowadays. So I think there's always a lot of value in the heritage already existing. I don't think you should push people to send. I think you should make them so excited about the topic you found that they want to talk about it. And mostly that happens quite easily in a 1-hour conversation.
Advice, and really thank you for sharing that. You talk about the spotlight effect in the visible leader. Could you tell us more about it? And can an introverted leaders also be visible leaders?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Let me start with the tougher one. Can introverted persons be visible leaders? Yes. Visibility starts with yourself. We already talked about that shortly. So if you just come in with a certain value set that you choose for yourself. And it can be something simple like I had colleagues who really took care that they had good food every day. And that had a major impact on me having a shitty eating routine. I'm sorry for the bad word here. And just out of their self-love and their self-discipline, they started to influence our whole office, our whole company. I was the leader of an advertising agency with 20 locations in Europe. And that spread over locations. Because when you do that with a certain conviction, it has a trigger. The second aspect, a lot of introverted people think a lot, and that's sometimes very painful. And I just would recommend to think about what is their ventile to get that thought processes into something else. And that can be music, that can be art. It does not necessarily have to be something you read on LinkedIn. So you don't have to expose yourself professionally, but I think it's really important to get that massive brain power into some focused areas. And sometimes it helps to let that energy out and then think again if you're will to write a LinkedIn article or something like that. Let me park it like that here. An introvert will always say, I don't want to be visible, and that's completely fine. We don't have to call it like that. If you say, I make an impact, and you get your feedback, and you get your acknowledgement, that's fine. The problem is when you are an hidden expert that don't share, you don't receive validation or feedback, so you cannot grow anymore. And that's dangerous because then you are alone with your self-critics. So you think about a great startup for dog food, and you think about it every day, and there's nobody around you who gives you feedback. Imagine where that story goes over the sake of 5 years. You might not produce dog food anymore. You might be in the spaceship industry, but there is no validation. And the thing is, you put a lot of hard work in it and you will feel very little gratification, psychologically speaking. And that's very draining. And this is my shout out that there are areas in my life where I'm very introverted because they are very important for me to save. And I feel you out there, whoever hears that and says, it's easy to say that when you talk like a waterfall. We all have these areas of protection. And when these areas become too big, we lose authenticity and we lose the feedback for who we are. So my recommendation is get acknowledgement, feel seen by the people you really matter. And if it's only 3, then it's 3 people. That's fair enough. It's just important to stay in that flow of sending something, receiving feedback, receiving acknowledgement, and giving back that impulse. That's very important, I think, in life. I'm sorry, I lost the second question, Marian. I got so drained in the spotlight effect. The spotlight effect is for everyone who says, I'm already motivated to go on the stage, but I feel scared. Or I might feel, what happens if I send this is my thoughts, by the way, I think 5 years ago. What happens if I send a LinkedIn post and there is a grammar mistake in it? And I was putting that really hard while working a 70+ hour week. So that happens. And that meant that my posting sometimes slept for 2 to 3 weeks in my inbox where I write my postings until I sent it. And the spotlight effect basically explains that we believe that the whole world is watching us. And we believe that all our vulnerabilities, all our, slack time, not being performing, all our weaknesses are completely visible and immediately judged by others. And that's not true. The scientific outcome is basically people don't care about you. People see you roughly with 20% of who you are maximum, and then they already pay attention. And most of the things that you realize, and I'm telling that as a true story, you can go on a stage and having your zipper open and 500 people don't realize that. It's a professional keynote speaker told me that 3 weeks ago in an interview, and she said, I walked up there, my jeans was the door open, Nobody cared, nobody talked about it, and I did not realize it. And that's a super example for the spotlight effect. Like even the very obvious things sometimes don't get attention. I have to add here, she was not the first speaker of the day. People were sitting 8 hours in a room, so you can imagine focus fades a bit away. The key signal is if you have the feeling people might find flaws on you, then let me tell you as marketer, this makes you interesting. Nobody wants to see the 500th version of the same job role or the same person. And as a psychologist, people will not see that. And you overestimate that by 70, 75% what people can perceive. So even if you go, and probably someone noticed, you go in a meeting and you think, I had a horrible meeting and nobody realized. Think of that. Sometimes this happens, or you go on a stage and you give a talk and you think, I messed up completely and nobody realized. So watch out for this effect that you think it was so obvious and nobody realized. It's happening a lot. It's called the spotlight effect. So if you want to dive deeper, Google for that. There are great YouTube videos that explain it a bit more deeper. The core idea is, first of all, your vulnerability is very sexy and attractive if you frame it right and if you do it on purpose. Yeah. So if I would go on a stage with an open pant, then very likely I would immediately start talking about it. And I would say, you might ask why I have an open band. I will tell you in 20 minutes. And you can be very sure people will wait and listen for that because they get curious. Yeah? And on the other hand, psychologically seen, you are more safe from your environment than you are from your own critics. So what happens in the spotlight effect is that our inner critics are louder than the critic and the attention of the other people that are around us. And if you're very self-critic, we talked before about introverts and a lot of thinkers, then this is very damaging. And one of the cures is go out and get feedback. Because if people tell you it was okay and you trust these people, your inner critic will hopefully silence down a bit.
Thank you. That's really very encouraging. So this is also for all the ones, especially for the introverted leaders that or perfectionists that want everything to be perfect. It's okay sometimes. If you have a flaw or something didn't work out, it actually could be a great advantage some case if it's framed well, as you mentioned. So that makes so much sense. And what I'm curious about you is because you coach a lot of leaders, Martin. You've made a conscious choice to help others move from the large corporates into helping many, not still maybe large corporates, but not in the full time as you were before, but as an advisor and really a leader who can inspire them and mentor and coach. After seeing so much and after being exposed to so many great leaders, what sets your heart on fire these days, Martin? What are the things that you get excited about, you get curious about?
So many things. You have no clue. Personal, I'm in the lucky state that I have a great wife who sits next to me and has to listen to all these curiosity topics that arouse. And yesterday, and I'm not telling that to share how smart I believe I am. I think it's just so funny. We talked about, does time exist or not? And there is new scientific research that, please Google it, I cannot explain that, points in the direction that time doesn't exist. And my wife is an educated teacher and she works now in a kindergarten. And we said, what does that mean for your job? And what does that mean for my job if we have no time? And we were talking about, does that mean we have to get up tomorrow? Obviously, it worked. So I'm curious about these scientific things that right now happen where, lines get blurred, quantum mechanics. I'm reading at the moment a book about evolutionary conscious. That means that our conscious was formed like all the other evolutionary models from Darwin, based on some historic necessities. And that means, for example, Marian, if you could save a family member or 15 people, whom would you save? And I'm spare you the answer, because the answer is you would save your family member. And everybody who listens, there's like a great scientific research that you can scale that up. It's originally about your child. You can scale that up to what about 1 million children die or your child die? And following up on that with lie detectors and finding out what people truly think is we are hardwired to protect our family and child first, no matter how irrational this number is. That doesn't mean everybody would act like that. But that's a very new scientific finding. It's not finalized proof. So everything I say here is work in progress, and please Google it for deeper knowledge. But these are the things that really interest me, because what holds this world together, I have the feeling we have still no clue who we are and already explore the Mars. So for me, this is kind of very exciting. On a professional level, I see a market of change. I see massive disruption ahead, and luckily, I saw that already 10 years ago, but now it's finally coming. I see a lot of jobs to be changed. I see a lot of values to be reflected on. Like, do we have to work if AI can do the work? And what is fairness in the context of these changes? And I'm talking about 10, 15, 20 years. But I come originally from advertising, like Canva, Photoshop, all these softwares can now do what in creative did 10 years ago in a week in 5 to 10 minutes. And I don't mean that with disrespect, because if the user is not well trained in creating nice pictures, it doesn't help you to have a great tool. But we are getting closer to this edge where technology will take a lot of necessities over. And I think this will make the human factor even more important. So I believe if the machine can do a lot of this is called transactional functions, so like putting boxes and installing stuff, then the strategizing, then these aspects of decision making will get more and more important. The question of how can people be more adaptable on change? How can they prioritize and feel themselves? And being very honest, this is nothing I put out in the market, but this is what's driving me right now. Because it doesn't matter if it's global warming, if it's the geopolitical situation, if it's political systems that you see changing, there will be change. And I think the question now is, how do we deal with the change on a global scale? And to care about that, I think it needs a lot of smart brains. I believe one of these aspects is to educate people to the good and to really show them there is a lot of things you can do with your time, with your energy, to be constructive. And this is caring, this is inspiring others, this is leading others. I think there are enough ideas. We just need the people now to do it. And for that, it needs leaders who are visible and say, this makes sense. And therefore, Marian, I believe it's so great that you have a company where you search for these people, because they will make a difference, because the machine can take over a lot of that. And I don't say that in an apocalyptic way. Like 100 years ago, other machines came and changed something. So that's life. We will just have a turning point. And I believe we as humans have to ask us, how will we deal with that turning point? And if we have no answer, then mostly we feel this is pain. So I think it's very important that we understand how our brain works, that we understand what we need to be happy. And, the rest, technology will happen. And I'm happy that it happens, because there's a lot of great things that come out of it. We just have to be aware of the only capability we have left is then to be human. And that means to connect, that means to care, that means to be creative. Sorry if I don't want to make that too dark.
For me, this is very helpful, and thank you for sharing those interests. I really, and I relate a lot to the comment that you make about moving forward. the future with all the AI, with all the enablement and technology. There's a lot of transformation coming. But that care element, that deep care and love for one another is what's going to make us even more, that was going to be even more special than ever before. If it was, so in a way, we're going back to our roots. So it's like going ahead, we have to really go to our roots. And I'm curious to learn from you, who are leaders that, or historical um, leaders that you aspire to, that you have felt that could be from contemporary world or could be from historical personalities that you really felt, hey, that was truly inspirational, of a great leadership, great care about humanity and people.
I have to admit I'm a freak. So if you ask me who are your favorite leadership books, I think my Kindle is filled with 250 books that I pushed in my brain with the big belief that a lot will stick in it. That's not true. Don't do that. Enjoy one book and then go with the next. I think historically speaking, I'm very drawn to Einstein because I had this luck with 17 years. I got a second-hand book of Einstein's letter in the time of the Second World War. And what I admired was the responsibility I felt that he, a scientist, has to tell now every university, I'm not going to participate in this because I believe this political system is not going to work for me. And he did that with a view on humanity that deeply inspired me. He gave me the feeling it's not about being an Austrian, being a German, being an European or not. It's about being a human being with ethics that takes a decision if you want to be part of a system or not. And there's a lot of pain in between the lines. It's not very entertaining, I have to admit, but I had that book and I read it over and over again. And for me, it showed a lot about how you can take a conscious decision even though you are not under control. And I think that's something very interesting because obviously he knew that political system would not change in that moment, and neither will the university have the possibility to say, okay, if Mr. Einstein tells us, then we change our opinion. No? But he did that in a way, communicated, that I felt so deeply respectful and so caring for the greater good, that it deeply impacted me on how can I bring that into the world. And then I spent 10 years in advertising and ended these 10 years and thought I did nothing in that direction, to be very honest. So you see, sometimes you get drawn away with, hard work and trying to be successful. And then you ask yourself the question, I did a campaign in 40 countries in the world, and that's great for my ego. But after 6 weeks, it's gone. And what impact did it make? Nothing that was relevant for me. And I think there's a lot of truth in that you have to be aware of what's really your impact. It's easy to go and say, I changed the world. It's not easy to change the world. But every day, every one of you who's listening here, you have the choice to say yes, or I prefer not to. And I think that's a lot of power we have, that I would love to see a bit more in the world. And so for me, that's a very inspiring figure. To answer it a bit more contemporary, I love Katz de Vries. It's a psychotherapist and leadership educator of INSEAD. There's a great video out there on YouTube where he does a group therapy with a member of boards. That's very radical. So I'm not advising that for everyone, but he basically talks with the families of board members of who they are. And he brings that back on the board and then says, Marian, your fictive wife said you are tight on money. How does that fit to your role as innovation leader? And imagine you have to have that conversation with a therapist in front of your other board members. So while this looks very raw, from a business impact, I'm 1000% convinced that this question could save the company's survival or not. I was innovation leader in Austria's biggest innovation network, and I can tell you that the wrong mindset in the head of an innovation leader can massively impact your company for the good or for the bad. And I think that's very inspiring that people bring these psychological tools into the business world and validate that. So everything he does is very scientific, embedded, and not for the show. But it's provocative, and I'm not advising that every board should do that. I think it's specific context, but I think it's a good tool to get this radical candor that Kim Scott is talking about.
Thank you for sharing those. When you talked about Einstein, there was one historical figure that he was aspiring to a lot, because he said a lot of the whole world is really looks at me, but I look at someone else. And is a spiritual leader called Petr Danov, who actually I relate to because um, he's really created. He's a Christian, but obviously using. And for me, I look back at those people who have made a profound impact. And if you look further down and further back, is Jesus, who sacrificed his own life. And if you look at how is that manifest to today's world in solving problems to young people or our own day-to-day life, it's the example that we have from what are the pastor, what are the church. So they could be the best examples, but also it could be quite the opposite as well. So I think it's very important to go directly to the source and look at the actions of people and how do they really react and care in, especially in moment of crisis, in moment when um, they have to sacrifice. That's the true testament for me personally, to see how people react when they have to sacrifice something of their own fathers.
I'm not quite sure if people don't sacrifice today already. Yeah, just probably in a less conscious way. Yeah, but Marian, you're working a lot with leaders, with executives, and I'm not asking for an answer, just hypothetically. But how many % of them have a calendar filled 60 plus hours? And if you do the mathematics on that, you have a certain amount of hours a time, and I'm not excluding myself here. I think that's just a trade-off that people do, and some of them do it consciously and say, I do that because I have this mission and I have an arrangement with my family, and we are all aware of that, and other people just do it. And I think there are big sacrifices of leaders, of employees. There are a lot of people out there who are not in the fortunate situation that they have a job, or they have a job that fulfills them, or they have a leader who cares for them. So I think there's a lot of sacrifices out there. Psychologically speaking, I think the state before a crisis just allows you to narcotize that with whatever you do on the weekend. And I don't know, I launched a campaign 2 years ago that was called Happy Monday. And I asked people to post that when they love to go to work. And I invited 6 companies in Vienna to join us and just ask their colleagues if they love Mondays, please post it. If not, then not. And it was very funny. It was a big fuck up. So 2 companies had like very high rates of postings, and the other 4 to 5 companies had not so many. And there caused a lot of conversations on, is it so shitty to be here? And one of the finding was that one of the companies had on Monday morning a sprint planning starting at 9 a.m. Yeah. And while it might be fine for a lot of people to have clarity on what's going on in the week, they found out 50% of the team were not so eager to do that at 9 a.m. They would rather do it at noon or at 1 in the afternoon. And they just shifted that little routine. And 50% of the employees were more happy. So sometimes the pain we suffer is easy to fix if we acknowledge it, that there is a sacrifice, that there is something where we lose energy. And I know I'm talking about very tiny examples here, but the difference between a state of uncertainty, let's call it like that, a crisis where things are not clear, and clarity is at the end just energy level. So you invest more energy of your brain for uncertainty. And I agree on the aspect that if you have something that fills your heart, that's very essential in these times. Does that make sense, Marian? Did I hear you there?
Absolutely. No, that's for sure that is very helpful. And you're right. The sacrifices, everybody makes the sacrifice, but for different reasons. And this is, as we say, if there is love and sincere, peace, joy, which I call, the fruits that we are blessed with. That is really extraordinary, and then everything else will come. But if we lose the joy and the love of what we do, and that peace, really that cross motivation with you, that's then something that is really fundamental for our own personal as a leader to do the right thing, to help others, to serve others. And it's when you do those, you feel that you feel sleep better. It may be hard work, it may be a lot of, as you say, long hours, but when you do the right thing and when you love what you do and you do it with all of your heart, and you have the joy. So this is where the um, really important aspect of when you distinguish of when we do things with that intent and that love and sincerity, and when we do it with just because we have to, or just because we believe we have to, or we've been told we need to. And I think what you're talking about, what we believe, it's very important to help those leaders that to shift, to change, minor adjustments. It comes with energy level, but also communications and beliefs at the back end, understanding what drives them to to do all of that. But wrapping all this topic and coming down to you again, um, what gives you energy? What gives you? How do you take care of yourself? In other words, to be operating and advising others at the level you are.
That's a good question. A constant learning field. It took me more than 10 years to realize that I don't function on a flat line. So I'm either all in or nowadays in deep relaxation states. And that took me really long from a mindset perspective to accept that, because I had the feeling, why can I not be continuously high energetic the whole year? That was my math in my head. And I know this sounds very stupid, but imagine you are 20. I became a dad at that time. So I felt I have to be responsible. And I pushed myself up to the limit and further. And I realized that your brain is a very effective tool to really mess with your body. Because if you tell yourself you can go on, you very likely can go on. So be careful. If you are good in self-discipline, that's my advice. Don't try until the brain says no, because you can very hard push yourself. And in emergencies, this is great, but that's not a good operating model. My operating model now is more based on impacts. So I create a vision with an employer, I create a vision for my life, and then I work towards it. And that can take 6 to 18 months. And usually then I reevaluate and see where I stand. And in these 18 months, there are blocks where I don't work. And then there are blocks where I work pretty intense. That works the best for me. Playing back 10 years, so 30-year-old Martin, I would have said I'm a loser. I have no consistency and I'm not able to manage my energy household in a correct way. So at that time, I became vegan. I made more sport. I put all the effort on the body, and that worked, but it didn't satisfy me because it was not my operating model. So I had to go through these extremes of very hardworking, very healthy living to arrive at I'm different. And that's fine for me nowadays. And a couple of years ago, I signed a contract with a very big company that employed me. And I had the first clause in the global company that was saying, you don't have to be at work to prove that you're working. And that was so important for me because I came from my own agency and I was used to work when I work. That could be Sunday evening, that could be Monday morning, but I was used to on a Tuesday, I don't show up. If I planned it correctly and I thought that time is better invested, I did that. So it took 6 months to get that into a contract. That was quite a complicated process for my peace of mind. And I think like it's not what your employer is telling you or what are the legal rules. It's about your mindset. If you feel free in your job and you can express that and align that with your leader, then you are free. And a lot of leaders who care give you flexibility that you can prioritize depending on your biological rhythm. Like I was leading a team where everybody was very eager to work very early at 7 a.m. And then we had a new team member who joined who was the very opposite. So we had to find common stakes somewhere in this 2 to 3 hours where we had overlapping time, because I truly believe that makes a difference if you force yourself every day to get up early, if that's not your biorhythm, or the other way around. And I think you cannot scale that in an organization and say everybody comes whenever he wants. That might not work. But this is the responsibility of leadership to, balance that out. And I think this is my biggest learning and finding, that when I need a break, I need a break, no matter if it's planned or not. And when I feel like I have the energy to tear down the world, I do that. So sometimes I get up, I take the laptop, I work for 2 hours, and I achieved something that would take me a week. And on other days, you go in the office, probably the listeners know that as well. You go in the office, you sit there and nothing moves. And I just learned on these days, I'm not going to wait 8 hours. I'm going to do something else, because I have the quite good sensor on what's blocking me. And I learned that sometimes half an hour walk is already enough, so you don't have to ride off the whole day. I don't want to sound too dramatic here. But if you have a shitty day, admit it to yourself and your whole day will change, because you might not go in a critical conversation with an employee, or you might not go on a negotiation with a vendor. I think this is something we underestimate, how big is the impact of how we feel on our environment. And I often oversee that. That's why I'm very eager to tell all my concepts on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Marian, it's been a very enlightening, and to share all of those insights and your best practices and experience. Final words from you. If you had the power to make any change of the world, what would you do to make the world a better place, a more caring place for us to live in?
That's a great question. And I tend to answer it in an unusual way. I want to believe that humanity is able to do that without me interacting. And that's my biggest leap of faith, that it doesn't need one person to do something great for humanity. I think we all have to do it. And I want to believe that we will do that all together, because it's needed, everyone. Yeah. And so I back out here and say I would do nothing. And that's my statement to the world. I'm not going to save you, and nobody's going to save you. We have to do it together. But it's a warm invite to make that with a lot of joy and fun and happiness. And I don't know, I use this wish to get everyone a free drink and a great weekend with their family, something like that. But at the end, I think the big problems in the world need to be solved by all of us. And who am I to give a solution for that? I think it would be cool. There are more highly intelligent people in India than all university students in America. And that's just a number. I don't intend to make any weighting on that. But there's a lot of potential in the humanity that we don't touch because of social disbalance and so on and so forth. So everyone who hears that, let's get our ass up and do something and just change that. I don't think one person should change that.
Martin, once again, thank you for your time today, and blessings go to you, your work, and your team, and your clients. And if anyone would like to reach you, what's the best way to do so? Whether this is for helping them out with their coaching, personal team advice, what are the best channels for you?
Yeah, if you want to go the business way, visible-leader.com is the website where you can apply for a coaching. Then you get a questionnaire, and then we find out if we fit together. If you just want to chat or read what I'm about to think, I think LinkedIn is a good address. You find me under my name, Martin Wolf, Visible Leader. Should be easy to find. Or ping Marian and say we should have a coffee, the three of us. I think the more brains, the better. Always happy to have a personal introduction as well.
Excellent. Martin, thank you so much, and wish you a fantastic, really, rest of the year. And thank you for being a leader.
Thanks so much, Marian.